Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host Rich Gear here as well. And before we get going, Doug, we're going to talk about some stuff we just experienced. But I did want you to make mention a little advertising about your new upgrade of your Dr. Hale's Home Remedy Recipe Book. Doug put this all together. Quite a labor of love you did. And why don't you talk just a second about it? Just a second about it would be good.
It's a book I found in my grandmother's attic. It was written between 1844 and 1863 by a doctor. And it's pretty amazing. I found this. It's a unique book. It has all this fancy writing in it. And so what I did is I took the handwritten pages and transcribed them.
Yep, transcribed every one of them. It's quite amazing. Some of the funky recipes are pretty fun. But so it's a kind of an interesting read for those who are of a mind. It's pretty interesting to look through some of the strange things they would prescribe back in the 1840s. You know.
Right. So this just came out on Amazon and it's also on Kindle. So
good. Oh, it's on Kindle as well. Good deal.
On Kindle. So you can. If you Google Dr. Hale's Home Remedy and Recipe Book, you should be able to find it.
So anyway, Doug, I just want to give a little bit of a shout out for that the new revision of the book. It's kind of neat that you've had those. Doug's published several books now, and but we've also had and what we want to really talk about tonight, and we're kind of wing this. We don't really have a script tonight at all, but it was basically a trip. Doug and I, Hal Spaeth, Rob and his wife Rachel, which is Hal's daughter, we all went down to see kind of a behind the scenes tour of the Creation Museum, and we also got to go to the Ark Encounter. These are very amazing things, but the cool thing, Doug, I thought was we come in there and Carlotta. What's Carlotta's last name? My brain just went blank.
I don't know her last name.
I didn't, but she's such a great gal, and she's like Ken's kind of right-hand man, and we're coming in there just kind of trying to find a seat. She said, no, you got to come over to Ken Ham's table, and that was kind of nice. We went up there and got a chance to talk to him and just shoot the breeze, and he had some things he wanted to talk over with Hal and us. We talked about different things, but it was pretty exciting to do that because there was a new exhibit that they were opening up last weekend, the weekend we were going down. What was it, the 8th?
Yeah,
the weekend of the 8th. Anyway, and so we'll talk a little bit about that too. But it was very exciting. Mm-hmm. I love going down to the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter both. I really like that a lot. And they treated us like royalty down there, didn't they, Doug?
They certainly did. I remember when it was just the three of them: Ken Ham, Mike Zovath, and Mark Loy, who were just dreaming about this whole endeavor, and they went out and got some funds and built this museum, the Creation Museum, and just they're keeping upgrading it, and making it so much fancier and more realistic, and I'm just amazed at what we saw down there. We got behind the scenes and going through their place where they put together all their exhibits.
Well, I got a little bit of dog in this fight because my son recently took a job down there as a project manager, I guess, in the tech department. But and I helped him move down to Kentucky, it's Florence, Kentucky is where the museum's at. The Ark Encounter is about 40 minutes, south and west?
South.
Just totally south? Direct south? Okay. Anyway, and when I was there, we got a chance to talk to there was a couple of Dan's supervisors, and I got a chance to talk to them, and I got a behind the scenes preview beforehand. I got a chance to go into the art department and look at the stuff there, and I'm drooling because they had some neat stuff down, 3-dimensional computer CNC machines where they cut out all their large forms, their computer 3D printers. We're maybe talk about doing something like that. But anyway, just talking to the artists, it was really funny. I remember going down there, and I asked them a question. They were getting ready for a new exhibit, which was the Fearfully and Wonderfully Made exhibit. Right. And I would get there was it's really one of the most pro-life exhibits you're going to see. It's really, really well done. But I'm down to it's like a giant womb, and a baby, and they're hand painting it and getting it ready for going on. And I said, well, what kind of material are you using to paint on this? And they said, water-based oil paints. And I looked at him, I go, as an artist, that is wrong on so many levels. And they go, yeah, we know, water and oil, but yet I know they made it. That's one medium I've never worked with, Doug, is a water-based oil paint. So I've worked with acrylics, oil paints, gouache, which is really an opaque watercolor, alkyd paints. I've worked with watercolors, of course, just standard translucent. But I've never worked with oil-based water, so I was fascinated with that and got a chance to do that. So it was nice, Doug, when we came down 2 weeks later, we got a chance to go in. You had to go in this time. We got to go and see the laboratory where they're doing the stuff. It was very, very wonderful. Of course, to me, I'm interested in the techniques of it. The Fearfully Wonderfully Made exhibit, Doug and I got to go in. We were like the first of the first to go in.
Yeah, we were first.
But as a museum guy, I just retired from a museum, 33 years working there. I said, I love this exhibit, and they had an effect called Pepper's Ghost. Now I'm familiar with that because it's a magician's trick. A guy named, I think Pepper is the guy last name, but it was by 1880s. I'm not sure when it exactly came, but it's an effect where you have like a scene or a three-dimensional object. It could be. They had one up in Mackinac Island, Doug, and there's a ruin of the fort. Then the screen goes on, and then it looks like the fort totally restored, projected right on top of it. It looks like it's there. Well, this actually has movement, where they have what conception happens, and you have like sperm cells coming in and and kind of there's an explosion, and there's 12 steps, Doug?
I think it's more than that, but
there's 12. I mean, it's one panel.
Yeah.
But of course, as a museum guy, I looked at it, I go, this is a really wonderful thing. But I'm an older guy now, and the print size needs to be a little bit larger. Okay, it should be 36 point. I know you have a lot of text and you're trying to make it fit aesthetically, but for people, because it's at a level where you're like 3 feet away, you're just far enough where you can't really see it. You have to lean in to read it. So I said, but the exhibit itself is exquisite. It's just this amazing thing, and we got to go through that. And there were several things involved, including one. You want to talk about the woman who was actually did a presentation, and she was the result, or she was actually a failed abortion.
Right. Her twin was aborted.
Yes.
And they didn't notice that there was a second baby in the womb.
Right.
And by the time they discovered that it wasn't the second one was there, it was too late for the abortion.
Right.
But let's back up a little bit.
Want to back up?
There's some people here listening to this may not know what the Creation Museum is.
Fair enough. Okay.
Or the Ark Encounter, and what they believe and what they are all about. And I thought we might start out a little bit going back a little bit in history and describing what took place maybe back in the 1961 through.
Oh wow! You really want to go back? You want to go back to
yeah.
the Genesis Flood book, huh?
Yeah, the Genesis Flood was the book that really started all of this. And
John C. Whitcomb and Henry Morris.
Right.
Yep.
They were put together. All this book was really a classical work. It's still valid. Most of the things in it, and but it talked about how they could explain, how the book of Genesis could work with the scientific facts that we find today.
Specifically, the proposal was to have a young Earth. A lot of us are familiar with that now, and even people who are against it, old Earth creationists or evolutionists, are familiar with the term one young Earth creation. But at the time when Morris and Whitcomb wrote this book, it was pretty much, and almost no one believed in it. Maybe, I think the Missouri Synod Lutheran were pretty much young Earth and Seventh-day Adventists, but outside of that, none of your Protestant denominations either talked about it or believed in it.
Right.
Okay.
There was a fellow by the name of Alfred Rehwinkel back in 1950 who wrote a book called The Flood. And he was one of the very first ones. There was George McCready Price, who started talking about that. And Rimmer was another guy back in the 30s and 40s who wrote about science and the Bible.
But the time was right for Whitcomb and Morris's Genesis Flood. In '61, even then it took another 10 years, but it launched something that has not been able to be stopped.
Right.
And it was so amazing because I think biblical creationists or biblical Christian people wanted to believe that Genesis was real, wanted to believe that Adam and Eve were real people,
Right.
that Abraham was a real person. But the science, so-called, was so stacked against it, and all the worldview, whether it was political, scientific, governmental, it was all stacked against that kind of a worldview. And this book, I don't say single-handedly, but because these other books were there, but they were pretty much marginal.
Right.
You know, they were not really. This book took off, and it was at a time when people were ready. There was a lot of unrest and things going on, but it was right before the Jesus Freak movement that really
Right.
came out. So there was a time people were hungry for spiritual truth. I kind of feel like that's where we are right now, Doug, in a way, you know. And they really are what wanted a spirit. And this book came out in '61, and by the early '70s. It was, if not mainstream, at least in many Christian circles, very well known and very well accepted.
Yeah, Henry Morris, he would go around speaking with Dr. Duane Gish and giving evidence, scientific evidence for the young Earth, and it took on the radioisotope dating problem.
They took that. They took on transitional fossils, transitional things. They took on the age of the Earth.
Right.
That was a big thing because there are a lot of people, even today, they have a real difficult time with age of the Earth issues. And, there are people that don't accept evolution, but they still are willing to accept millions of years, not understanding the contradiction, really, from a biblical standpoint, let alone a scientific one, that it presents. But that aside, it really launched. By the '70s is when the big debates were coming along, and the evolutionists, in their arrogance, basically would tell, we'll mop the floor with these creationists, these dummies, you know, and they got the floor mopped. The floor was mopped with their hides. And I still remember going into one debate, Doug, where they said, "That guy just tore my guy up. It's not possible." But he was just so aggravated that his guy had just been not only lost, but was just shredded, you know. And this is back in the '70s, Doug. And it got so bad that pretty much most evolutionists will not debate creationists anymore.
Yeah.
Once in a while you get some. I'll give that one guy, who's the guy, the science guy. He went in with Ken Ham, Bill Nye. And he actually went down there. Yeah, he's kind of, I mean, I don't think he's that reputable of a science guy in one respect, but I give him kudos for at least being willing to debate, because most of them will not do it anymore because they get beat every time. You know?
Well, it's hard to argue with the facts when you have the scientific evidence that supports your position.
Well, and God willing, there's enough honest evolutionary scientists that are presenting I hate to be redundant and repetitive, but real facts. A fact is supposedly real, but but the point of it is, like what's her name, Mary Schweitzer, who talked about the Tyrannosaurus Rex hemoglobin.
Right.
Okay, she's an evolutionist. Okay, but she was honest and she basically, they come up with the idea, there's no way this should be here, but it was there, red blood cells. Now they're obviously not really backpedaling, but they're trying to.
Obviously, red blood cells can last
millions of years. That's how they come around it. But in reality, we know that it's like DNA doesn't work either. Well, carbon-14 doesn't work. Anyway, all of these things are going more and more on our side. So, Doug, the Creation Museum. Remember in early '90s, and they were trying to get funds for this.
Right.
And they tried to get a piece of land, and I tell you, the hostility that was raised up against them was amazing. We read about, and they couldn't even get the first parcel of land, first area that they wanted to try to get, and all the political machinations and all the stuff. Were not able to get it. But Ken, Mark, and who's the other guy? Was the third?
Mike Zovath.
I don't remember meeting him.
He was the guy we sat with the first day we were there.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's right. But I mean, I'm talking about it at the time. Okay. Yeah, I remember him being at the way back. It doesn't really matter. Long and the short of it is they persevered, and they got another parcel of land. And I bet you Kentucky's liking the fact they gave them, because there's a lot of tourist dollars they're bringing in. There's a lot of money coming in there. But it's not about the money for Ken or his associates or the museum. It's about trying to give you an alternative worldview that presents you with some of the facts that it's kind of like people accuse the mainstream media being totally slanted to the left. Well, in the evolutionary thing, they're totally slanted to evolution. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they really will never give you the facts. They'll give you, oh, here's the new missing link, or here's the new transitional fossil. Then they find out it's not, or presents more problems than before they had that. They put that on the back page, or if at all, and you never hear that. I mean, that's how they were able to get away with things like Nebraska Man and Piltdown Man for years and years and years. And even after it was done away with, it's still, still things are come up there. Well, Creation Museum gives you an alternative viewpoint. I like that one book about Grand Canyon, A Different View.
A different view,
yeah. Because it was a different way to look at the same evidence. And that's one of their big their points. We have the same evidence as an evolutionist does.
Yeah, the tactic now is to cancel you. And that particular book is not at the Park store that I remember.
A Different View?
The Different View.
Yeah, I know. It's not there anymore.
And instead, there's another one that was written by the opponents of it, And so it's a situation where our point of view is not popular with the mainstream scientific community, the governmental bodies, the educational. I still remember, Doug, years ago. Remember when we were out? You had me temporary webmaster for just a bit. There was this girl, a young woman, and she was really furious at us because her friend had become a young Earth creationist and reject. And then she started arguing, saying, "You guys have all this stuff, and my friend now has become a young Earth creationist, and you brainwashed her." And I said, "And you have all this stuff," and I basically said right back to her. I said, "Well, all the educational materials are all evolutionary. All your governmental grants and programs are all evolutionary that deal with this issue." Mm-hmm. All of your books that are out there in the secular media are all evolutionary. All your television programs, media, they're all evolutionary. So where do we have the advantage? We publish a lot of books, and people are looking at them because they want the truth of it. But she also made the statement that her father was a minister and never tried to brainwash her into creation. I says, maybe that's your problem. Maybe he should have given you that viewpoint. She never wrote back, but that was a sad thing. But here's a person raised by a Christian minister, and they were afraid to talk about these issues. To me, that's why, I mean, how many times, Doug, have you come up with people, even recently, that don't believe that dinosaurs are real? Yeah, that's a bad argument.
That's a terrible argument, because they're real. But they lived during the time of human beings. They didn't live millions of years before. People are so propagandized.
That's what the Creation Museum
is all about.
Shows the dinosaurs living with humans. And of course,
they hate that.
We have the evidence that we've seen ourselves, where we have petroglyphs on the rock wall of the Natural Bridges National Monument.
Yep, the Kachina is it Kachina? Which bridge is it?
Kachina Bridge.
Kachina Bridge, yeah, the
it's
second
the middle
bridge.
Middle
bridge, yep.
And so you find all these dinosaur footprints and human footprints together. And then we have the soft tissue in dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah.
Which has really become...
That's revolutionizing things, man.
It's showing that they couldn't be millions of years old. And so the question is, where in the beginning, back in the 1800s, when Darwin's theory came about, why did that become so popular? And started with Lyell, with his idea of measuring how fast Niagara Falls eroded.
Yeah, which is wrong.
And so he botched those figures up and came up with, that was 11,000 years. He thought that was enough to prove the Bible wrong. And his tactic was to come up with a scenario where you have to deal with these long ages, and therefore it strikes at the very heart of the beginning of the Bible.
Right. It goes even earlier than that with Hutton
and
people like that in the late 1700s. That's what really a lot of this the floodgates of this kind of thing. People were ready to abandon Christianity at that time. That's where we had the French Enlightenment, where they threw Christianity totally out. Even in the Age of Enlightenment, which I call it the Age of Endarkenment, and basically they wanted to throw God out of the equation. It was the beginning of really strong humanistic tendencies, and they were ready for this, Doug, and that's why Lyell set the groundwork to have ages longer than the Bible would allow for. And then Darwin came in showing how transitional things could change from one form to another. And that's and on the surface of it, Doug, because they didn't really understand certain things. I wonder if Darwin, well, he was pretty much against God for personal reasons, but you wonder, I mean, their idea of a cell was basically a little blob of jelly. They didn't understand ribosomes and cell walls and Golgi bodies, or whatever, how you pronounce them, and all the stuff that makes up the cell. They had no idea that stuff was how complex the machinery is in the living cell itself. And that to me is quite amazing. But it allowed people, when you saw, okay, wow, from these dogs, we got all these different kinds of dogs. And I said, well, that's evolution. I'm an evolutionist, Doug. Because according to Noah's Ark, 2 dogs, we got all the dogs. So they come up with natural selection, but that's artificial selection.
The original dog had all the information.
All of it there.
In the genome, and there's plenty of information in the genome to make all kinds of different dogs.
This is
varieties of dogs.
Yeah, this is the thing we always try to talk about, Doug, and I think it's important. The fundamental difference between, the term they use is microevolution and macroevolution. A lot of people don't like to use those terms, but I'll use it for simplicity's sake. When you talk about transformation, change over time, I believe in that. From according to Noah's Ark, 2 dogs, we got dingoes, coyotes, I don't know, maybe foxes. I'm not sure what the linkage is. There's a lot of experiments going on with that. But the point of it is, wolves and everything from a dachshund to a Great Dane come from these 2 amazing dogs, it seems like. So I believe in change, but I don't believe a dog could ever become a cat.
That's right.
Or an amphibian could ever become a reptile. Or a Komodo dragon could turn into a lion. Those things, I know I'm being simplistic here, but I mean the idea. It's a fundamentally different process, Doug. You have to add something that wasn't there before.
Yeah, basically one of the things that creation research is trying to discover is where these barriers lie.
Right.
We know that there are barriers where you just can't do enough variety within the species to produce like a bear from a pig.
Yeah, and that's from the mammal to a mammal, let alone something that's totally like a reptile to a mammal. But the thing about it is, Doug, those things that we've the Creation Museum talks about this. Of course, what I love about the Ark Encounter, which is another one, it's related. It's with the same ministry. That is a full-size Noah's Ark, and you realize how big that thing really was. Mm-hmm. And they explain how the Bible tells you that certain kinds were taken on. That's what we're talking about. The Hebrew word is baraman, okay? And it's a kind. But it's interesting, Doug, even the secular people recognize distinctions. Cuvier could not have had his nomenclature, could not have had his classification system if even people did not recognize there were limits. We don't always know where the line goes sometimes. I grant you that's true, but it's not like one turns into another thing. No matter how much time you have, it makes it even worse. Creation Museum goes into a lot of that stuff. It really does. I mean, I'm really, really excited about the stuff that some of the new stuff that's coming in. And of course, I got ahead of myself talking about the new exhibit which is coming up in there, that's really about creation too, in a sense, fearfully and wonderfully made. But it's not about creation evolution, but it's really talking about the creative power of the human being.
If you take a look at that exhibit and go through it and understand the complexity of what's going on in that, you need to understand that is not something that's possible to happen all by itself.
Yeah.
And
even if you had all the elements, Doug. All you need is energy and the chemicals. I said, really? Put a dead frog in a microwave oven and see what you get. Strike it with a piece of lightning. A blowgun. Nothing gets created by energy and materials. No. There has to be something that allows us to be organized. This is intelligence. You know, this is hugely, and that's part of what the creation. But the creation, what I like about it is they're not. I mean, I like intelligent design, but they stay away from age of the earth issues. To me, from a creationist or from a Christian standpoint, Doug, the idea of Jesus Christ sacrificing himself on the cross to pay the debt of sin, which brought in death, physical as well as spiritual. Jesus' sacrifice is irrelevant, and I think that's ultimately the Darwinists know this. The people who are really polemicists for evolutionary, they want to kick God out of the whole equation.
That's right.
And the idea that we have a need of a savior because we're lost, and God wants to restore us to himself. That whole idea makes no sense if the world was already, death and destruction was around for millions of years. It makes no sense at all. If physical death and spiritual death were going around, if T-Rexes were killing Triceratopses, or Allosauruses were killing Stegosauruses for millions of years, then there was death before Adam and Eve, or whoever the first man and woman were, whoever you decide they are. Death preceded that, and according to biblical reality, through man came death.
And many of the old Earth creationists have to deal with the fact that they're trying to take Neanderthal men and some of these ancient,
make them soulless human beings,
soulless human beings before Adam,
Right.
And it really creates a very dangerous theology.
Pretzel theology is what I call it. You got to twist yourself inside and out just to get to that point. And it's like it doesn't really. And it's like they're trying to get respect from the world, Doug.
Yeah.
And the world doesn't respect you at all. They think you're dumb as a brick to go for older stuff. They go, oh, they'll get on your side as long as you're against us. But they hate your Christianity, and they want nothing to do with it. So they'll make friends with you to stack it against us. But the reality is, behind your back, they're ridiculing you. They don't believe in Jesus Christ. They don't believe in the sacrifice. But I'm telling you, Christ died physically because we died physically through Adam. Christ died. He basically went down into the lower regions of hell, brought the captivity of souls back up through his sacrifice. Spiritual and physical resurrection through Christ Jesus alone, because there was physical and spiritual death through the first Adam.
Well, what's interesting, Rich, is that now that these museums have been established, and before this there was one that the Institute for Creation Research had in San Diego. Now there's as many as 36 creation museums in the United States and Canada.
Amazing.
And it's amazing that you have the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of places where if you really want to search out the truth, you can go ahead and go to one of these museums and find out for yourself what is scriptural, biblical, and scientific model is for the history of the world and the history of the universe.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.